Hi everyone, this is Raj and I'm a principal business architect. I've been in the Pega ecospace for a very long time and I'm here with my colleagues Ravi Padwal and Yashasvi Pratap Singh. Ravi is a PSA and Yash is a principal UI architect. Now here we are today to talk about our experiences using the new way of working in Pega, which is the Constellation way of working. Now, let me talk about my experiences first and my learnings, right? And when I started to look at the Pega App Studio, the new, the latest and greatest of the Pega, what really struck me is the BS, being a principal business architect, always previously when it was the old way of working, I used to do is I used to wait for the LSAs or the PSAs to create a case type. And I used to have all the discussions, the DCOs with the business stakeholders, and I had to wait for the LSAs to create the case type. And then uh, I only used to work on the user stories and nothing on the tool as such. Very, very little things on the tool. Now, with the new way of working, the biggest thing that I have learned is the feature mapping. Initial, you go back to the drawing board, first understand the requirement, and then you come up with your business features along with the POs, the product owners, and break that business features into reusable components. And a feature can have a single journey or it can have multiple journeys, right? And each you need to create those case types based on a particular business outcome. So outcome-driven modular case design is something that is what I have learned, and this also ensures that it's a microservices-oriented architecture as well, right? That's the first part, and then the dependency on LSA. I was talking about it, right? The dependency on LSA is something that always the BS used to have in the previous, on the old school of thought. Now, because the micro journeys are defined and the reusable components are defined, now what I can do as a principal business architect or any LBA is I can go ahead and draw the case type, draw the case design as such, and then focus more on the business outcome. And I can do that along with the business SME. And I can also do the data modeling and the interfaces and personas. And Pega App Studio also provides something like integration. I mean, you can always also configure integration by actually dragging and dropping connecting those request and response parameters. So those are some things that I have learned. And I think this is the new way of working for Pega, and I'm very keen and looking forward to work on more such projects. With that, I will pass it on to Ravi Padwal. Ravi, can you share your views on that, please?
Yeah. Thanks, Raj. So, hello everyone. I'm Ravi Padwal. I'm working as architect on Pega projects for a very long time now. So I started my Pega journey as an engineer in Pega's core engine team, where I used to build a lot of system management feature. And then I moved to the application development using Pega product. So I've seen that complete journey of building applications using Designer Studio to the no-code way of building the applications now using the App Studio. It was a really difficult switch to the App Studio because I have worked on a lot of complex Pega projects where application development used to start with defining a class structure first, then thinking about the pattern inheritance, direct inheritance, the situation layer cake. So when Pega started promoting the App Studio, I was very hesitant to get that into my project because I had a lot of questions that how do you select a rule set? How do you make sure your rules are going into the correct classes, which we used to check as part of our code reviews. But then we did a hackathon between two groups where two groups were implementing the same application requirement, and the group who was using App Studio was very fast than the group who was using the Designer Studio. The application that was built was very good looking with all consistent UI, and it was with 100% guarded score because App Studio was taking care of all the best practices, where the other groups has to still justify the warnings or fix the warnings. So that was really the tipping point where I started exploring the App Studio more, and that just gave me other times to focus on some complex stuff of the application. And when we build the stuff using App Studio, it automatically builds in a channel agnostic way. So you build your logics in the to focus on some business outcomes. The business outcomes becomes the micro journeys, and you implement your micro journeys in micro apps. We call them as accelerators. So when you focus on micro apps, your application complexity naturally reduces, and even that complexity, App Studio handles it for you. So if any LSAs has challenges with their developers, where the developers are building the code in channel and creating issues with omni-channel experience, I think the best thing to do is just make a switch to App Studio. Sorry, Raj, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So I was asking, thanks for that, Ravi. What's your opinion to make that switch, all the LSAs? How did you personally make that switch from the traditional way to the Constellation way of working?
Uh, well, it was a difficult decision because traditionally the LSAs were working on projects for a long time. They look at the project from very technical perspective. They do most of the case design, as you said. So I think to switch to App Studio, a change in mindset is required. I think LSA needs to keep their ego aside, involve the business architect more, where business architect can focus more on the case design aspect, and LSA that gives the time to LSA to focus on the other important aspect of the projects like cloud, the performance, and I think it was kind of easy for me because the people who have worked with me for last many years knows that I always tell one thing: if you can build a feature without writing a single line of code, I would like to go with that approach. For a simple reason, if you don't have any code, there are no defects, there is no maintenance. So and when you use App Studio, uh, uh, I I don't have to tell this to people anymore because App Studio automatically enforces it. It handles all the best practice, handles all the guardrails. So I was naturally reducing time on the code reviews and governance. So it was a very win-win situation for me. So I just went ahead with it. And best thing is for me is it made the upgrade very smooth. So in my current program, we have upgraded the Pega platform 8 times in a span of 1.5 years, which will be very new for a lot of people out there in Pega circle, where historically a client always thinks about Pega upgrades as a painful thing.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. Okay, let's hear from our UI expert. Yash, would you like to share your views on that, please?
Yeah,
On the
thanks,
switch.
Raj, and thanks, Ravi. So I'm Yashasvi Singh, and I've been working in Pega from last, from very long time. And I'm before before the Constellation, I was like pro in designing and developing the UI in traditional UI architecture. I was like a go-to person within the organization for any UI related issues. But when I started in Constellation, in the beginning I struggled a lot. There were lots of questions in my mind: how can I get these, how can I put these, how can I get this particular design, how can I achieve this particular look and feel. there was lots of questions, and I was nervous as well because there was very few documents available at that point of time. But then, when I started to read about the Constellation, when I started to learn about the Constellation, I understand its capabilities and the power of low code that Constellation brings into. I can say it's really fast. It follows it follows the design pattern. It's consistent user experience across the channel, and it also adds lots of added on features like accessibility, which comes out of the box. So there are so many other features which comes with the Constellation architecture, right? So you don't really have to worry about as a UI developer or UI architects, how you have to manage these things. Earlier we used to spend a lot of time in this, so now I don't think this is the case, right? So one more thing I would like to highlight here is that earlier in traditional UI, we used to use the live UI tool and tracers and the many other debugging tools to work on the UI and to know what all the properties are, or what all the layouts are used, and how the architect the inheritance, not inheritance, basically how the the DOM structure has been made. But when it comes to Constellation, I hardly use tracer now. I only use network trace because it's a API driven approach, and where whatever you see on a UI, that is also broken down into multiple microservices, which is being controlled by Constellation itself, right? So that is something I learned. And slowly when I started moving, learning the Constellation, I started asking questions to myself. Hey, this is the Constellation does not have how can I extend the Constellation UI components, basically, right? Then I started to learn about the DX component generator, which lets us to create, update, and delete the components in the Constellation server itself, right? So by which I also understood the core Constellation concepts, which are pcore and pconnect, which Constellation engine itself uses to interact with the DX APIs and gives the response to the UI. And that is really important to understand, to know how Constellation works internally, as in in Pega as well, and how it gets the response to the any external UI, right? Then also when I learned about all these things, I started to ask questions to myself, and how can we extend the design system. So right now uh, Constellation uses Material UI as a design system, uh, but I wanted to extend that to some other design systems, like Lucid Design or any other market available design systems, right? So then I started to learn about SDK, how SDK has been built, how SDK is internally, how it is connected, how we configure the SDK, and how we interact with Pega processes. Also, how we can inject our SDK to any external websites, or sales, like it could be Salesforce or any standalone React applications, right? So there was a lots of challenge between this whole overall process, but overall I would say it's great experience that I had so far. And I count myself as one of the advocate for Constellation.
Thanks for your views and your key takeaways. And what do you suggest, Yash, for the guys who want to or willing to switch to this? What are the key takeaways for them?
So it's a good question, Raj. And so my learning was, I had to unlearn many things which I used to do, that does not does not apply here. So I kept my ego aside, and I start putting efforts, and started learning about the Constellation architecture. And I understood it's very important. It's very beautiful and powerful architecture. It's fast, and it's consistent. It's channel agnostic, and most importantly, it's outcome oriented.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Yash. I think you heard from all the three of us, the principal business architect, the principal system architect, and the principal UI architect. And now to summarize the overall conversation, right? I think Pega has slowly shifted the focus from LSA-driven case design to the LBA-driven development, and more on the microservices and from a microservices-oriented architecture. And as you must have read, as Gartner predicts, for almost 70% of all the applications will be built in low code, no code. by 2025, and this is the place to be. I mean, Pega, the new way of working in Pega is the way forward, and I wish that we all learn from this tool, and also we implement this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.